Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery, ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Neider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Today, Kurt and I have the privilege of talking with Casey Gooding. Casey is currently working as the National Business Development for Burning Tree Programs. Since 1999, Burning Tree Programs have been treating the chronic relapser and their families. With 3 programs, they're able to treat substance abuse disorder and underlying mental health issues with the addicts and alcoholics that addicts and alcoholics often face. Casey is incredibly busy. He is on quite a few boards on the NAATP as a lead ASA for the state of California. He's on the CASA president, the NAADAC Public Policy Committee. And so doing a lot of work in the industry. So Casey, we might touch on some of that, but thanks so much for being on with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Shelley. Looking forward to this opportunity for a while now, so thank you again.
Yeah, pretty excited, and I know you've got a lot of background as well as your own recovery story, and being so involved in these different organizations, you also get a lot of the changes and the best practices and some of the things that are being shifted in the industry. So you've got a lot of information to share, and maybe we can start, if you're open to that, is maybe sharing some of your background and some of your recovery story and how you ended up where you are today.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. My name is Casey, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is 11/29/2012. My journey started long before that. I found myself in and out of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs for quite a number of years. I think I spent my 18th birthday in my first rehab. Unfortunately, that would not be my last rehab. And at the young, ripe age of 34 years old, my parents contacted me one last time after they had sat and talked together, and they had a real frank question for themselves at that moment. And, the severity of my disease was, and between them, they asked themselves, if our son perishes, do we believe that we've done everything we could to save him? And fortunately for me, at that point in time, they stated that they hadn't. And so they made one more effort. They contacted me and said, if you're willing to come here to California, where they were living at the time, where I live now, we will find an appropriate treatment program for you, and we'll support you in any way that we can to ensure that you are on the road to recovery. And for me at that point in time, it was kind of one of those situations where it was like, what am I going to do? And, it was very evident to me that my life was not going to improve at all under the current circumstances that I had endured, and my disease was continuing to be, it's progressive and fatal. And I knew that if I didn't accept the opportunity, that I would find myself institutionalized, jailed, or likely, dead. And so on 11/28/2012, I took that Detroit Metropolitan an airport right here to Santa Ana, and my parents picked me up and dropped me off at the doors of a treatment where I would stay for about 60 days, and I continued that care with additional sober living and intensive outpatient support. And I built a recovery community about me here in California. I got a sponsor. I worked all 12 steps, and I had a spiritual awakening as reps. I certainly understand what my condition is and what separates me from other people that don't have issues with substance. That I suffer from a threefold illness that affects me in my mind, body, and spirit. And so I had to treat this spiritual disease with a spiritual solution. And as a result of the 12 steps, I was able to find that. And, as a result of the 12 steps, I certainly I have the privilege to share that with other people now.
That was the short version, I'm sure.
That is the short version, yes, of course.
I'm wondering, you mentioned a couple of things. It sounded like you had been in treatment a couple of times, or had you only been in treatment once?
No, I was in treatment at 17 to 18th. I spent my 18th birthday there. I had been in and out of many detox programs locally. I had went to a few indigent programs in Michigan. This was kind of before Affordable Care Act and utilizing insurance for treatment, and it wouldn't have mattered much anyway, because in those days and times I wasn't insured anyway. But I had many treatment experiences. Unfortunately, I would find myself in a position where I could maintain sobriety for a week, a month, 3 months, even up to 10 months. And obviously, there would be renewed hope for my family and people that cared for me, and they would see my life improve considerably as a result of my commitment to sobriety. But the one thing I didn't understand was I was stuck with this spiritual malady and this obsession in my mind that continued to make me think that they wouldn't know, or I could get away with it, or that I didn't care, or all the different lies that I would tell myself, just one more time, these kind of things, and find myself in failure to remain sober over and over again, essentially. So luckily in 2012, that was the last treatment episode that I had to enter. And now I get the privilege of working for, a great treatment program and supporting families and individuals that are suffering in a similar way.
Very cool. Can you talk a little bit? You referred to a spiritual disease or spiritual malady that you were suffering with. Can you talk about that a little bit in depth and help us understand what that looked like and how it shifted?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we read the doctor's opinion, which is, language that's written years ago, right? And so it's easy for an alcoholic to say, well, I don't understand the lingo, but I definitely understand that, what the doctor was talking about, essentially. And when I take a look back, and I've gained a little bit of clarity in my life, and I've went through a detox, and I take a look back at each time that I relapsed, what was going on within internally inside of me that was creating that change. And, if I suffer from the disease of alcoholism, it means that I suffer from a threefold illness. And, that affects me in my mind, my spirit, and my body. And, for people like me, it's easy to tell that I'm alcoholic, because when I honestly want to, I find that I cannot quit entirely. Or when I start drinking, I have very little control over how much I take. Once again, that repetition starts to come into fold. And preceding each of those instances, there's always these feelings that I can't get away from. That I'm a failure, that I'm irritable, I'm discontented, that, there's shame, there's guilt, there's all these internal feelings that are happening that are creating this need to drink and numb my feelings away. And essentially what I learned is, once I've gathered a little bit of clarity, if I can fix those issues internally, then I have a better shot at turning off the obsession. And, one of the guys in my treatment program, Pastor Dale was his name, and he said, an easier way to get to doing that is, take it easy, stop doing bad things and start doing admirable qualities in your life and institute those in your life. And, since that time, I think I've done a pretty good job of that. Don't beat myself up anymore. I'm able to experience my emotions, walk through those. And I certainly have, a program that implements accountability and responsibility to manage my condition appropriately, which puts me in a position to be in contact with a power greater than myself, and which really solves my problems.
It seems as though it's a simple answer to a very complex question, right? Is to work on that spirituality piece, and I like the way you explain that it's kind of that threefold: your mind, your body, and your spirit, that you've got to address all angles of that in order to really find some healing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, oftentimes I get asked to speak at meetings here locally, and obviously I say yes to those requests quite often. But I'm often kind of, questioning myself, well, what is the one thing that I could share with you all that would spark your interest in creating a life in recovery? Unfortunately, it's not just one thing. Certainly having an understanding that I suffer from this disease, same as other people that is there, is kind of this foundational point that we have to have. Otherwise, I'm not going to stay if I don't believe that I suffer in the similar capacity that you guys do. But yes, there is a wide variety of different things that work in cohesion within the program that, that are extremely important.
And a lot of that just has to do with timing, right? You
Absolutely.
can say the right thing to somebody in one of those groups, and if it's not the right time, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So timing's an issue. The other thing that we see a lot of times is times of change, right? Times of transition. So you just came through a transition, right? Luckily not a career change, but just a change of employment, right? So How has that process been for you, and what have the tools been that you've relied on through that process?
Yeah, I've been really in a fortunate position. I, as a result of in my recovery, I found myself in a position where I could give back in a way. I can utilize my story to support other people and families. And I learned a profession as a result of this. And, I've been employed over the years in behavioral health and working for, just now my third program that I have the honor and privilege to represent. And so the process for me was, it was challenging. But at the same time, I was supported by so many other professionals that said, hey, take a little bit of time for yourself, make a good decision. God has an answer for you. He has a plan for you. Trust in the process. And, I waited, and I talked to my sponsor. I talked to my therapist. I talked to AA. I talked to other professionals that I'm engaged with. And they all said, golly, Casey, you really worked hard over the last 5 years. You should take a month for yourself. And in that month, I was able to see my kids and my family and spend with close relationships and enjoy some things that I personally like to do. And, I was engaged in the right conversations, and I found myself in the right situation. And, today being my second day representing Burning Tree family programs, and I couldn't be more happy. It's truly a wonderful organization. They have really saved the lives of some of the best friends that I have in the entire world. They represent themselves with integrity, honesty, and excellence, right? And to have an opportunity to represent that brand and be a part of that organization, really warms my heart to be able to be there. So very fortunate, that's for sure.
I was going to ask you what attracted you to Burning Tree, but you took care of that one pretty quickly. So we'll move on from that question, right? What's
pretty simple answer? Yeah.
Yeah. So aside from what attracted you, since it's your third program now, you've seen some of the different approaches, right? So how does Burning Tree's approach change? And what are the things that they're doing that are different, that you see that they're implementing?
So Burning Tree has three very specific and distinctly different treatment programs. The program that I mentioned most often, and what they're really known for, is their Ranch program, which is a long-term residential treatment program for individuals individuals that are also for other means. People like me would probably have been a really good candidate to enter that program. This is only when if they change for their loved one. So it's really a one-of-a-kind type program. Typically, the clients are engaged in the process for a year or more. They offer all levels of care, but their residential treatment is a long-term treatment episode. There's a lot of behavior modification instituted. It brings about a lot of accountability and flexibility, some of the same characteristics that we see in individuals that are successful in 12-step programs. They also have a young persons program located in Tucson, Arizona called Burning Tree West that offers extended care services for young adults. And then last but not least, they have the Renewal Lodge, which is a 30-day treatment located in Austin or Elgin, Texas, which offers their services to a wider variety of demographics that may be privy to the services they provide. And so it's allowing us an opportunity to cast a wider net to support and assist different individuals that have specific needs.
I'm wondering, Casey, you talked about the fact that you really moved across the country, and I think your parents were probably a catalyst for that. There's a lot of talk in the industry, a lot of insurance companies just recently trying to prevent some of that movement across state lines or across multiple state lines that we're seeing happening now. I'm wondering, what's your take on the value of being able to move out of your environment as opposed to staying right where you are for treatment?
Yeah, for me it was extremely important. I had made a mess of my situation locally. I can't imagine if I would have went to even a high quality treatment program locally and completed that program in 30 days and then returned to my local environment, that I would be here today, speaking about recovery. I don't know how that would have worked. For me, it was invaluable. Here in the county where I live and reside and have worked in programs and, here locally, we have a 2% share of all the AA groups in the world. And one of the really selling points for my family at that point in time was that there's a really conducive recovery community here that supports individuals in early recovery, in addition to, having high quality resources that certainly were not available in my local state. Even now, in the year 2021, Michigan, where I'm from, is an extremely underserviced state when it comes to offering high quality services for individuals suffering from mental health or substance abuse. So it's kind of disheartening to see providers like Optum sending us and limiting their members to their general service area. That, in my opinion, could be detrimental to individuals that need specific kinds of treatment assistance. Specifically, when you look at dual diagnosis, mental health, eating disorder, pain management programs, there may not be a specific type of program in your state or even in the next state next to yours. So I'm not sure exactly how they're going to manage that. To me, an individual who's experienced in different points of advocacy, it seems to be a breach of mental health parity. But we will find out because it's just newly been I know there will be a lot of advocacy agencies, there will be a lot of providers that will band up to try and prevent this action from continuing, essentially.
Well, and I would also think that I'm just sitting here thinking about the ramifications, and when you're looking at like first responders, right? There's not as many programs out there that are designed specifically for the first responder, and that's a unique group of individuals who still have to go back out and do the jobs that they do, who still have to go back out and be in danger, but for them to be in treatment, especially police officers, to be in treatment with the same people that they maybe had to put in jail, or the same people that they're enforcing and trying to create safety in the community, that kind of puts them in a compromised situation as well, is that they're not getting the specific types of treatment that they need, and certainly it would be detrimental to them to have to go to treatment with the general population. So that's another group that I think would be really impacted by those kinds of changes that we're seeing happening.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think one of the wonderful things about being privy to a lot of services that are available throughout the country is we see a lot of treatment programs available for individuals of that demographic, right? And unfortunately, we need to do a better job of educating our consumers because a lot of times people, for whatever reason, select the wrong type of provider, then maybe turned off in regards to appropriate treatment for specific individuals. You need a lot of specific type treatment providers available throughout the country to support the wide variety of people that are entering treatment. And I believe that we will see a wide influx of individuals seeking treatment for this next year because obviously we've just get ourselves out of we are finding ourselves on the way, hopefully, out of a pandemic, which has brought about a lot of additional mental health and substance abuse concerns for the general population in the United States.
Definitely. It's an interesting topic, and it'll definitely be, it's all of us are kind of sitting on the edge of our chairs trying to see where this is going to go and how we can make a difference. So I love that you shared your insight around that. I'm curious about the different organizations that you're part of and how those organizations impact treatment and impact the rules and regulations around that. Can you talk about each one of those organizations just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the first one that I typically have a little bit more of my volunteer time associated with, and which is National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers, or NAATP. So I've served on the membership committee for NAATP over the last, coming up on 3 years. They are leaders in the field of substance abuse and mental health, and essentially they have about 1,000 organizations and supporters that support the organization, and each treatment program or provider or supporter pays dues into a large pool so that the organization can represent themselves nationally and locally. They provide a lot of educational material. They support individual programs. They have a PAC representative in Washington, D.C. that is looking at national legislation that supports behavioral health facilities. And they have a directory essentially that you can get to on their website to identify different providers within your state or members that are a part of the organization. Recently, in 2019, I had an opportunity for their national conference, and we showed up in Washington, D.C., and we had a really unique opportunity where we could make appointments with our senators and House of Representatives, legislative aides, and talk about issues that were affecting behavioral health care at that point in time. And, some of our concerns were, the opioid epidemic, and there was a lot of legislation and funding associated with combating the opioid epidemic, but we felt that mental health and substance abuse as a whole was a much larger focus that needed as much attention as specifically opioids did. Another couple things that we wanted to touch base on was mental health parity. We've already mentioned mental health parity in regards to the recent Optum decision, but we continue to see mental health parity breached by insurers throughout the country with, support for their members. Outrageous out-of-pockets and deductibles associated with their care, denial for authorization for levels of care that ASAM criteria designates. And then the last subject that we wanted to breach was, at the professional community or behavioral health organizations. And NAATP had adopted a code of ethics that their members, the 1,000 programs and supportive members, needed to adopt. And we were asking at that point in time that there would be some sort of government oversight in regards to some of the unethical behavior that we find in our industry, which is really sad, right? And I think you have a subset of providers that are really trying the right thing and work within the confines of law, and then you see other sets that are trying to abuse the privileges that are available to them. So in 20, while we were in the pandemic, NAATP unleashed a state advocacy toolkit, and Nikki Soda, their membership director, and Mark Dunn, their PAC leader, asked if we would set up a statewide advocacy campaign here in the state of California. So the one thing that I was able to do was reach back and speak with all the people that were participating in the event in 2019, and we had stayed in touch. They agreed that they would support that mission, and we organized a service board, and we started hosting monthly meetings to start educating addiction professionals throughout the state of California in regards to some of these concerns. Our ideals were that oftentimes in behavioral health, we sit on the sidelines and we allow policies and legislative efforts to go forward, and we rely on others to do this work for us. And then when change is needed, we have to change according to what has been passed, and we may not like that change. So our ideas was to utilize our political system and our politicians and educate our membership to participate in advocacy efforts locally. So that's what we've been up to with NAATP, and as a result of that work that we started with NAATP, Sherry Layton, who works for La Hacienda and is a large advocate throughout the United States working for NAATP and NAADAC, asked me to join NAADAC's public policy committee. And so I think the only representative on the public policy committee that is west of the state of Texas. So I'm just getting started with them. I've completed my first meeting. I'm really looking forward to participating in that in any way I can be of service. And it's really a unique experience to be in the position and have an opportunity to participate. And it goes right back to the roots in the 12-step program and AA. It's just kind of one of those things when you're asked to participate, I say yes, and I find out how I can participate the best as I continue to understand and engage in the work.
So Casey, this is it brings up a question to me, and as we've talked about, these big insurance companies, they've been in doing this for a long time, and we see a lot of the shifts that happened in the medical arena happening in the behavioral health arena. And I'm curious, we've got all these organizations like NAATP and NAADAC and that are really trying to advocate and call out some of the things that are happening that are unethical. How much influence do we have, and what changes are you seeing happening as a result of these efforts?
I'm glad you asked that question. It's a really good question, Shelly, because we do have a lot of pull here, and there is obviously strength in numbers, right? One voice is not louder than 100. Since the time in 2019, here in the state of California, SB 855 was passed just recently, which is reinforcement of mental health parity, which means that facilities and treatment programs in the state of California, if there is an insurer that is breaching mental health parity, then there is a task force associated with it where they can report their breaches of mental health parity. And essentially, if the provider is providing ASAM criteria for a specific level of care for a client or a patient, and the insurance company is denying that level of care, then that essentially is a breach of mental health parity and can go to the task force. So that is one thing that, as a result of advocacy efforts, has passed here in the state of California. And I would expect that more states will take on this piece of legislation, and so we'll see this going around the country. And that's as a result of solid advocacy efforts. Also, during the pandemic, a lot of additional funding and resources was asked for multiple advocacy efforts throughout the country. And so we saw a large funding project be established for behavioral health throughout the country, which was another piece of advocacy work. And there is constantly things going on that were preceded by some sort of advocacy efforts.
It's good, because sometimes going up against these big insurance companies feels a little daunting. So getting involved in some of these organizations that are being successful and being able to implement change is a good way to go.
Absolutely. I wouldn't want to state in any way that we are against insurance. We're actually very, very for it. Besides people that are seeking our support, an avenue to quality benefits, right? And so our goals are to work in cohesion with our supportive agencies, our national organizations, our state organizations, work with our politicians, and find ourselves working alongside the insurers to ensure that there are appropriate rules that we can live by and they can live by, so we can get to the work of supporting individuals and families going through treatment and maintaining a life of recovery.
Well, and I appreciate that perspective too. Insurance companies are doing an awful lot to help people get into treatment and help support that. And so I appreciate that. Sometimes it feels like it's us against them, but that's really not the right way to think about it, because it is in conjunction with their efforts and in conjunction with what they're doing. So I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to consider, and we're seeing this a lot more often. I think there's a lot more providers out there that are establishing in-network status with insurers, and which makes their services more readily available to a variety of people. Fortunately for us at Burning Tree, we do have that option with either Renewal Lodge and Burning Tree West having a couple of in-network contracts, which allows us an opportunity to support individuals and families at a lower cost out of pocket to them. So we look at those things as really good things in our industry, and we want to ensure that everybody that needs support finds it in a certain way.
Absolutely. With the COVID pandemic, I don't know. I want to optimistically say it's coming to an end, and it's going to be over soon. But that may be a little over optimistic. Telehealth has really looked at some interesting shifts and changes due to the pandemic, and I'm wondering what your perspective is on telehealth, where you see it going, and the role it's played and its limitations. Do you have some thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think thank God we were able to institute telehealth during that pandemic, because there was a wide variety of people that needed professional services that they were able to reach and maintain. And we've seen different organizations take on specific programs relative to telehealth. There's a lot of psychiatric, therapeutic providers that are offering telehealth services. I see my therapist right now through telehealth, right? Our arena, our environment changed a little bit when it comes to that. It certainly has provided some safety for the clients and the providers in the interim. Do I believe that it can take the place of face-to-face engagement? Not necessarily, but I think it can support in a way that is very convenient for people. Oftentimes we'd be in a position where we would be supporting an individual or a family that's coming here to California for a specific type of treatment, and then they complete it and return to an environment very rural environment that doesn't have a lot of saturation of treatment resources. So I believe in those cases like that, providing some sort of case management, intensive outpatient programming, private practice therapy, psychiatry can be, a real game changer for our industry that can support people, into long-term recovery, with those services. So definitely, I think it is huge benefit to the communities.
So I'm curious, you talked a little bit, KC, about some of that aftercare and some of that support network. And I know that in your recovery story, you also mentioned that you've created this support network. Can you talk a little bit about personally, I heard you say that you go to counseling and you see a therapist. What are the things that you do to maintain and to perpetuate growth in yourself, personal growth, and maintain that sobriety?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when you take a look at it just maybe from an AA perspective, you think of steps 10, 11, and 12, right? That I'm keeping consistent inventory on my motives and behaviors on a daily basis, and that I'm staying in constant contact with the higher power and God that I found as a result of working the steps, and that I'm sharing a message of recovery to other people and walking them through the process, which allows me an opportunity not to think about myself so much and invest my time and energy on supporting other people, which kind of takes away the biggest problem is that I think of myself all the time, and that's kind of how that goes. But more importantly, when you take a professional role and, you designate your life in the support of other people, it's important that you maintain some healthy boundaries for self. And so I have chosen to stay engaged in my sponsorship, which means that no matter how sober I am, that I don't have the answers for everything and that I'm never too sober to ask for help. And so I have the same sponsor that I had from the beginning, and, we meet regularly and see each other at meetings and talk often, and we share intimate details about our life, and we stay current, honest, and transparent with each other, which, definitely works for me. And then, yes, I did mention that I see a therapist. I actually see the same therapist that I had in treatment 8.5 years ago, who works in private practice now. And I love and respect her, and she's done great things for me. But it's just another way that I can continue to take care of myself on a daily, monthly, weekly basis. And then, there are other opportunities. Some professionals go to intensive professional programs, once a year to do those things. For me personally, I have a very large sponsorship group. I attend multiple AA meetings weekly. I'm engaged in a recovery community that supports me. Just yesterday, it was me and about 10 other guys that are part of my sponsorship family, a lot of which that I sponsor. They were able to invite their wives, their fiancés, bring their children. My wife came. We all got together and enjoyed a day at the beach. And, we can look right out that window and see the beach, but we were down there and saying, hey, we need to do this more often. We live here in California and we aren't even enjoying the beach because you become so accustomed to it, right? But sometimes it's about getting back to basics or enjoying simple things in life. And, I'm a big believer that I have to have some time that I'm enjoying life. And usually I'm looking forward to the next thing that I have to do. And, so that may be a family vacation. It may be a personal trip. It may be, some form of work-related activity that I'm looking forward to. So, again, this is another very broad topic, and there's a lot of things that are involved in it, but that's specifically what I work on to maintain my health.
Well, and I love that you share some of those things, because everybody does. Every time somebody shares, they share something just a little bit different, something that works for them a little bit differently than what someone else might. One thing that you did mention that I don't hear very many people mention it quite the way that you did is that when you engage in service and thinking about others and in helping others, it takes you away from your own thoughts about yourself, right? It kind of makes your problems seem more manageable. I don't hear a lot of people talk about that concept, but I think it's a really powerful one. And I'm wondering if you can talk about it just a little bit more.
Yeah, right in the big book, it states nothing, something along the lines, nothing will create permanent sobriety or as intensive work with other alcoholics, right? And so intensive work with other alcoholics provides me an opportunity. I have been granted a reprieve from this disease that's based on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And part of my spiritual solution is to share this message that was so freely given to me in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And, as a result of sharing that message, I've had multiple men come up and ask me to be their sponsor, which I'm honored and privileged to do, which means I get to take time in my personal time to, show them the things that I was shown for free for my sponsor. There is no amount of service that I can do in Alcoholics Anonymous that will ever repay the debt that I owe that program for saving my life. I am absolutely thoroughly convinced that, I would have perished if it wasn't for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've seen so many of my friends that were in Michigan in a similar situation as me that are no longer here, and I'm sad that they didn't enjoy the same freedoms that I did. And nothing makes me feel better than giving back. My purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. I didn't have a purpose before I got to the program, before I got sober, before I found recovery. And keeping that simple purpose in my life has been, extremely important to me. And, I've been privileged to be able to live with that purpose on a daily basis. And, I've been really privileged to be able to institute that in my work life, almost daily as well. I engage with families, I engage with individuals, patients, clients. I engage with other recovery professionals that walk this journey with me. And it's really, a unique thing to be a part of and a special thing. And, to be able to share that with other people is an important message that needs to be heard.
I appreciate you sharing that. It's no wonder, that so many people that go through recovery and go through treatment end up back in the industry working, because it is a great place to serve and give back what was given to you. So I think it's a great cyclical kind of a program when you can, go through it and do your healing and then continue your healing process while you share with others what you were given.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I imagine, Casey, and I'm just making an assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, but that you're probably a pretty big reader, and that I imagine you probably read quite a few books.
I read some spiritual books, and I read a lot of Big 12 and 12, that's for sure, at meetings on a weekly basis. Yeah, I do enjoy reading, absolutely.
I'm just wondering if you can recommend one of your most recent reads to our audience, one that you really got a lot out of.
Well, I've been reading a lot of books from addiction professionals recently, and I really appreciate Dr. Louise Stanger, and she sent me a signed copy of her new book, which is Addiction in the Family. And then, so I've given that a read recently, and there's a lot of great tidbits in there about supporting individuals on the path to recovery, and specifically their support network. A good friend of mine, Kevin Peterson, is a writer and author, and he sent me the Chronic Hope, which is his book, and so I've given that a read recently that I really, really enjoy. And then I obviously enjoy a lot of Augmendino's work. So those are some good books that I enjoy reading to bring me closer to this spiritual awareness, or this power that I found as a result of working these steps.
That's awesome. And I love that you didn't just stop with one book. You gave us at least 3 books that we could go check out that you found very useful. Casey,
and 3 authors.
And 3 authors, right? 3 different authors, not even the same one. There's so many books out there that I always like to ask, just so I can enhance my reading list and go read something new as well. So thank you for sharing that, Casey.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you being on with Kurt and I today, and I suspect that there's going to be some people who want to connect with you, if not to talk about the associations that you're involved in and the changes that they're making, but to maybe connect with you, based on your recovery story and the work that you do. What's the best way for them to get connected with you?
Well, they can reach me by phone, email, whatever is easiest for them. I also have social media profiles on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. My direct information is 949-877-6517. You can send me an email at kgooding@burningtree.com if you'd like to touch base. And then look me up. I'd be more than happy to speak with anybody that's out there that needs support.
I appreciate it, and I can tell that you're so invested in the work and in helping people that I just appreciate that and want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for giving me a platform to talk about that today. I do enjoy that. It's been a real concur today, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Casey.